Grab a drink. Don't be shy. There's lots of room in the front row. Best seats. All right. You guys are good. Behaving. Very Canadian, yes. Awesome. Right here. Don't leave me hanging. Right here. I promise. Nice. There you go. Good job. Good stuff. Okay. Are you guys good? You guys are good? Everybody? Okay. Perfect. All right. I'm going to pass it on.
Hi there. My name's Camus Windsor. I'm the COO here at Wrangle, and you are in our space. And we are, yay! All right. And we are very excited to host this How to Hire and Retain Women in Tech Sales event. And this is something that's really near and dear to my heart, particularly. I spend a lot of time thinking about our clients, and there are some things that I think we need to keep in mind about our clients. And all top 5 of our big banks have been honored by the Bloomberg Gender Equality Index, and which means that since 2014, 46% of all promotions went to women in these banks, and there has been an increase in 33% of female executives. And so this is real, right? I mean, these companies, these big companies are embracing, this is truly part of their value core set. And as well, I was at a talk today that was actually really cool with a woman named Mary Ann Ewell. She's the head of HP Canada. And she was talking to us about what they call their diversity index. So any vendor that works with HP, if they do not qualify for their diversity and inclusion index, gets a 10% reduction, hold back in their fees. So they're really walking the walk and talking the talk. And our sales teams need to reflect both our clients' values and, more importantly, our values. So I think it's something that's really timely. I'm really excited to listen to the panel and talk about how we get more women in tech sales. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Kim Benedict.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. So my name's Kim Benedict, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Talent Minded. And so we are the first subscription-based full-service talent acquisition company in Canada. And so we think differently about recruitment and talent acquisition and HR. And so we started this forum, this next generation talent acquisition meetup, just about 18 months ago, so we could get like-minded people together in a room and talk about these important topics. So just before we get started, I want to talk a little bit about our purpose, the purpose of our next gen talent acquisition meetup. So the purpose is to create a forum so we can share and network and collaborate and capitalize on all of our strengths, our knowledge, and our expertise, and come together and share that. So that's number one. Number two, we like to tackle really tough topics, right? And bring in different points of view. So you'll see panels from us that aren't necessarily just talent acquisition or HR like we have today, because we want diversity of thought. We want a different point of view, content and speakers that you may not necessarily have access to in your everyday life. And lastly, raise the bar. So our purpose, our goal is to elevate the brand of recruitment, especially here in Canada. And so whether you are a veteran in recruitment or HR or a new grad or a new CEO, regardless of your industry, our purpose is to raise the bar at all levels, right? We can do better if we help each other. So we have a few objectives that we want to make sure that we accomplish today before we finish up this panel discussion and head back to the bar. So a couple of key objectives. So number one, we meet every other month-ish. So this is about our 8th, I think, in counting, meetup. And so we try to meet every other month and really keep it going. So we actually have, in our community, over 860 members. And every month we're growing and growing. So we want to make sure that you learn at least one new thing, right, that you can actually take back to your businesses and apply immediately. So not just concepts, but actual tools, tips, tactics that you can take back and implement right away. And given the expertise of this panel that we have, I'm pretty sure that you're going to learn at least like 4-ish new things. So we want to make sure you build your network, right? Make new connections. So who here is this their first next generation talent acquisition meetup? Right? Lots of new faces. So check, right? Done. And lastly, to build a community. So when the tide rises, we all boats lift, right? So this is very important to us to be able to share and help each other grow and develop. And we want to keep it going, right? So not threatening. Big Star Wars fan, but we want you to talk about us. And next time, bring a friend or tell somebody about the event. So we want to keep growing. We want to keep adding value. So tell your friends or die. It's working, actually. So before we get started, this is something we just did new last time, and it worked out really well, is community news. So we want to give you a chance, not just for question and answers, but to actually share some news. So this could be an event that you want to tell us about. This could be perhaps a job opening that you have or you're recruiting for. It could be a rant, right? For you that are in recruitment, maybe Taleo rant, that can be popular. So anything that you want to share with the group. We have time for a few announcements. You have 12 seconds. And the way to make the best use of this is get up, tell us who you are, share your news, and then tell us a call to action. Lots of salespeople in the room, but want to make a good point. Tell us where you can find out more about whatever it is that you're talking about. Okay, so we have a mic. Who wants to start? Community news. Yes, Fa.
I can just talk. Can you hear me in the back?
Yeah.
I'm looking for a head of recruiting and a director of HR. I work at Top Hat as the chief people officer. We're super high growth. We're building the foundation of the future best-in-class HR organization. Come join me. Call to action, reach out to me on LinkedIn. Like
Yespa.
Yespa, Jesper, at tophat.com. I'm the only Yespa in Toronto on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Round of applause for Yespa. Who's next? Jay.
Hello. So you're in our space, so I get 12 seconds. We're hiring like crazy. We're hiring salespeople, we're hiring software developers, we're hiring solutions architects. So before you leave, drop off your resume at the front, and we will accommodate. All right, thank you.
That's what happens when you don't refer your friends. Right there. Right there. Yeah. Thank you. Awesome. Wrangle. You're not hiring any women in tech sales, are you? Wrong place to be. Yeah. Awesome. Who's next? Who's next? Rant. We need a rant. Shan.
Hi, I'm Shan Roberts. I'm the General Manager for Align Technology Canada. We make Invisalign invisible braces. We are growing rapidly. We've got a number of roles, but one that I think is really interesting, maybe not for anyone in this room, but hopefully someone you might know. It's a sales leadership development role. So we're looking for someone young, smart, wants to learn sales. They go to Raleigh, North Carolina, and learn in our head office in an inside sales role, and then we bring them back to Canada. It's a kick-ass role. We've only been doing it for about a year and a half in the US, and the kids, I'll call them kids, they're mostly college grads that are coming out of this program, are hitting the ground and really over-delivering in the field. So it's a really neat role. We've only have one in Canada, and we're looking for a couple more. So if you know anyone young and wants to get into tech sales, it's a great opportunity.
Awesome. Good pitch. Round of applause for Shan. Well-kept Canadian secret, that technology company. Awesome. Do we have one more? Last one. Anybody else? I got a room for salespeople. You should be all putting up your hands. One more.
All right, I'll do a rant. My name's Edmund Chen. I work for a I run a sales consulting firm. One of the things that we want to do, and we work in financial services. So one of the things that we want to do is also promote hiring females in financial services. But one of the things, so this is community news. One of the things that we're seeing in financial services today is a demographic shift to decision makers being more female. It's happening in Bay Street law, and it's happening in Bay Street finance. So my position is this, is that a lot of the times hiring females and gender equality in business today, a lot of times it's pitched as an obligation. So somebody has to do it, or a company has to do it out of obligation. The premise that I'd like to frame to my clients is hire female staff and female salespeople not out of obligation, because that's where the demographics are going. If decision makers are more becoming female, they're going to be rewarding and working with firms that have more gender neutral or gender balanced firms. So it's hiring out of necessity, and this is where the industry is going, out of instead of hiring out of obligation. So that's what we're seeing.
Thank you. Good job. Thank you for the rant. It's a good segue, actually. So I want to say very special thanks. This is the first time that we've hosted this meetup at Wrangle, and it's been phenomenal experience. This is an incredible space. Thank you so much for your generosity. So just a quick round of applause for Wrangle. Thank you. And our key sponsor, Monster. So we have Angela, who's going to be on our panel today, but we also have a number of people from the Monster team. So thank you very much. We could not make this event awesome and like good wine, good food, not pizza, right? Without really amazing sponsors like Monster. So thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Okay, so our topic tonight, how to hire and retain women in tech sales. So why is this important? Really quickly, just want to frame up the conversation for what we're going to talk about on our panel. So it's a fact, actually. Recent studies show that only 19% of sales positions are actually occupied or held by women. Only 19%. And Statistic Canada, actually, recent study or recent report showed that only 3% increase in women in sales positions in Canada in the past decade. Over 10 years. Only 3%. We know, however, that women outperform men. And we're very detailed oriented. It's 73.9%. So we know that women outperform men. A study in the US of 1,000 sales professionals actually showed that companies that had 45% or more females drove 15 times more revenue than those that had less than 20%. And so the difference is 644 million versus 42 million. So we know that we outperform. According to a staffing report, sales is the second most in-demand job in Canada. And Ryan Holmes, if you read this recently from Hootsuite, wrote an article and cited the fact that specifically in the Kitchener, sort of Toronto, Waterloo, 7 out of 10 companies actually struggle to find sales and marketing talent. So this is the question. This is why I wanted to have this conversation. So we know this. Why do we still suck at it? Right? Why do we still stink as organizations on attracting women in tech sales? So I actually think that there's 4 reasons. 4 out of like 126 that we're going to share today. But 4 top reasons, fundamentally, why I think companies still struggle to attract women and retain them. So number 1, recruitment is broken. Right? We haven't, for most of our organizations, we haven't in like the last 10 years taken a look at our recruitment process. We keep doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. We're not redesigning or reimagining anything. So recruitment is broken. Your job ads are boring and generic and full of corporate cliches. This is actually a scientific, yes, here, for the recruiter in the front row. This is scientific fact, however. So I actually, it took me about 3 hours, but I actually, and I ran out of steam at 66 job ads, but I took 66 sales job ads. I ran them through Textio, if you've ever used Textio.com, and it scores your job ad against 4 million other job ads, and it looks for corporate cliches, too many bullets, too long. Like, there's lots of studies that show that women won't apply for positions unless they tick all the boxes, and took the average score of all of those job ads. And so 45% of those job ads out of 66 scored mediocre or worse than mediocre, right? 45%. 50%, or just over 50%, scored slightly masculine or very masculine in tone, right? So just really quick, and it's the really big companies that are bringing us down for the most part. So number 3, in my opinion, companies aren't trying hard enough. Recruiting women is different, and it's different because the top of the funnel is full of men, right? Our recruiters are at capacity. They don't have time to be proactive, and companies need to adjust to the fact that it is going to take longer and it is harder, period. So you're not trying hard enough. And there's a stereotype, right? Sales is like a dirty word, right? We think of coin-operated, used car salesman. So there's still this misconception and lack of education. I actually interviewed somebody, a recent grad out of university, and she said, I will do any job you want me to do except for sales. I don't believe, I was appalled. I don't believe in selling people things that they don't need. And I actually think that she would have made a great salesperson, and she wanted to be in HR. And if you don't think you need sales skills in HR, right? Yeah, you got another thing coming. So it made me realize that there's probably thousands of women like her that aren't even considering sales as a career. And then I just added this really quickly, and then we're going to get our panel to come up. But did anybody read the article? It was from the UK in The Guardian, and this was the title, Male Bosses, Pitiful Excuses for Lack of Women in Boardrooms Criticized. So I just pulled out 2 quotes because I thought it was relevant to this conversation. Companies and recruiters have to be more creative and persistent in looking for diverse talent, but it exists in greater numbers than it has ever before. And putting token women, I love this one, putting token women on their boards and pictures of them on the career site won't make a difference. You're not trying hard enough. So with that, let's do this. So we're going to have our panels come up. I think somebody's moving our chairs. Anybody? Are you leaving me hanging? Am I moving the chairs? Farah?
Where do you want it?
I think we're pulling them just up. Yeah. Thank you. I'm going to sort of sit-ish.
Pull it out to the
Yeah.
front a bit so you're not actually in the...
Yeah, here we go.
Just so that your heads aren't in.
Look at this teamwork. Is that good?
Yeah, those are good.
It won't be too much light in our eyes?
Will it like reflect off the login?
Okay.
Thank you. Oh, this one's good.
So as we get set up here. So the focus of this topic, so we've sort of framed it up, given you my thoughts and my 2 cents. We want to talk about the how and not necessarily, less about the what. I just want to make sure you guys can see me over here and you're not bending over too much. So we want to talk more about HR policies, programs, like internally to our organizations, and sort of steer clear of the Me Too. It's important, but we really want to focus on the business aspect and how companies can actually make a change. So you're not sitting in the right order, but that's okay. Not a control freak, but that's okay. Okay, so I'm going to introduce our panel. Guys, I'm going to introduce our panel and ask a couple of questions, and then we're going to turn it over to the floor. So we've got Jesper. So Jesper, as he mentioned already, is the Chief People Officer at Top Hat, hyper-growth technology company here in Toronto and growing in North America. And so Jesper's actually held many senior executive positions in HR and talent, companies like Uber, you may have heard of. You know, I have an affinity for you because you're one of the very first people in Canada to bring recruitment process outsourcing to the Canadian recruitment
Many years
landscape.
ago.
Yeah, it was a long time. We were a lot younger then. So lots of knowledge and expertise here, and we're excited to hear what you have to say. So we have Angela Payne, who is country manager for Monster. And Angela, you have spent years and years working in global human capital solutions. So what's interesting about Angela's background is that she has worked in a talent and HR solutions company helping global organizations, and now you're pivoting into technology sales as an executive. So really interesting, 360 view on this topic, particularly personally and from a profession perspective. So we have John Bodalai, and so John has years and years in very senior executive leadership roles as VP of Sales in companies like PeopleSoft. You did a stint at Workday most recently as the country manager, and so has led huge teams all over the world. And we're really excited to hear what you have to say. The accidental diversity and inclusion expert. And we have Wendy Williams here joining us lastly. And so Wendy, like John, has spent many years in sales executive roles. Started her career at GE, spent many years there, then went to an organization some of you may have heard of. She was a VP of Sales at NexInnovations, where I think you led a team of 300 altogether globally. And then Dimensions Data Canada, you were the country manager there, which was a $700 billion business, and headed up the Canadian division, which ran like a startup, right? And now runs her own consulting company. So welcome. So Wendy, I'm going to start with you. Who am I going to dump the big question on? So Wendy, I'm going to start with you. So you've done your fair share of hiring, obviously, all over the world. And so what are some of the things that have worked really well for you? What have been the most effective strategies? You don't have to name all of them, but some of the ones that you feel have been had the biggest impact, just as far as it relates to hiring and retaining women.
So this, I'll talk all from personal experience. But first of all, we have to get rid of this years and years and years.
I know.
A short time would work. But just
all
in terms of the startup, that's when I really felt that we really had to approach our hiring differently. And it really wasn't a strategy. Now I guess it was a strategy, but it was more out of common sense. The most important thing for us in a startup was to make sure that we attracted a diverse talent. Can you imagine, we were kind of late in the marketplace. We're starting a tech company, and we needed to hire the best of the best. And so we challenged everybody to make sure when we went through an interview process that we went right across the board. We're talking genders, culture, races. We forced ourselves to go through that process. We didn't hire the first person we saw. We needed to make sure who we hired was the best of the best. It was also so important. Can you imagine, how do you buy into a vision of a company when you're sitting in Starbucks and they're saying, is this your office? And you're going, yeah, for now. When are you going to get an office? We have no idea. When you start to sell. And so, it was, you really had to get them to buy into this vision. So the other thing we looked at is, I know everyone, they scrutinize resumes and they look at career history and they look at education, and we're going, okay, that got you the coffee. But what we really needed to make sure is that they had more EQ and IQ. We really needed them to be passionate. We needed them to be driven. And, in our case, very, very detailed oriented, and really want to get, the whole was greater than, the sum of the parts. Everyone had to buy into what we wanted to do as an organization. So I would challenge you that when you are really recruiting talent, really challenged your hiring managers to look at all the diversities, all the talent pools, and really make sure that that resume is just a check, and it's really about the EQ.
Well, I like when we were talking, you said you sent your hiring managers back, right? If there wasn't enough diversity in the pipeline, don't take the easy road, right? And you literally said, go back, try harder, right? Sort of what we were talking about.
Well, we often, because we were a new company based out of Johannesburg, I think a lot of people thought, great, we'll all go on safaris together. So we did attract a lot of talent that way. But I would also tell you, you think, okay, I'm just going to go after our competitors, number 1 or 2. We needed to be better than that. So we did push them back. We pushed them back and made sure that we really researched the talent pool.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So John, we'll go this way. So I'm really impressed by John because he actually did his additional research to prepare for this. So you actually interviewed 8 people, went back and interviewed 8 people that had previously worked for you to ask, what is it like, right? What is it like being a woman in tech sales, and what are you facing, and why did you come and join our organization? And so maybe you can talk about some of the things that resonated with you or that you discovered throughout that process.
Sure, happy to. And I guess one of the reasons when Kim and I were talking about this subject, I've been lucky. I look back over my career, the last 25 years in management, and I've actually been blessed where I've had pretty gender neutral or balanced teams for the most part. And so I didn't kind of know that was an anomaly or think about it that much, which I guess is a good thing. And as much as I'd like to say, hey, that's great, then you go back and look and say, okay, why was that, and how did that occur? And I work for I've worked for large companies and I work for small, and sort of you can see some different patterns in that. But I called up 8 of the women who used to work for me, both in sales management and sales rep roles, and I go, okay, I'm a guy, and I never really thought about this. What are the issues, or what did you see that I probably didn't see as I was a manager at that time in terms of what we did? And a few things stuck out in my mind, and again, there's a reflection on the companies and the individuals. They looked at different things, like mentorship was a big thing for them. And they said, hey, and I've helped them with that, others have helped them with that, and not necessarily a female mentor, or that's obviously a very good point, but also male mentors in the company as well too. So it doesn't have to be necessarily the same sex. But having a mentor or somebody in that organization they can go to from a sales perspective was good. The other one, and it surprised me, and of course I didn't see a lot of it, there was, and not necessarily under my watch, but in previous sales jobs they had, a lot of what I'd call cliques and little groups. One female rep mentioned, she goes, John, the first sales job I had, I was the first female there, and the men would go to lunch every day and never included me in this group. So, and I look back and say, so it's very important, the takeaway I get from that, and there was other examples which happy to talk about later, but it was, you got to look for those groups. And by the way, it's not just a male or female to me. It is, I agree wholeheartedly, Wendy, it's the diversity. Like, that team should be diverse, whether it's ethnicity or other factors. And you got to look for those cliques and make sure that you balance those correctly in the organization. And that was another big thing they talked about. And the other one I learned was management style. And again, I don't think that's male or female. I think that's individualized. And I'd say when I was first a manager, I was like one size fits all type of approach. That's how but then you learn over time that you've got to deal with them differently. And there are sort of gender specific trends that happen in that. I found females were generally more detail oriented, relationship building, and these qualities where men have traditionally in that sales role been that sort of hunter aggressor mentality. And again, I'm generalizing, so don't shoot me on that. Some of the statistics say the same things. But regardless of what that is and who that individual is, you just need to accommodate management style for the different people that you have. Again, whether it's male, female, or different ethnicities as well.
Or provide training.
Yes.
Yeah, to recognize. Awesome, thank you. Angela, so we're going to talk, first question I'm going to ask you is put your monster hat on.
Sure.
Yeah, so we talked a lot about this, and we talked about the job ads and
Yes.
my little experiment that I did there. But from your perspective as country manager for Monster Canada, what are you seeing organizations doing differently or trying to do differently, like the good job ads?
Right.
What are you seeing,
have
like
lots
kind
of
of as a
bad ones.
yeah? We can't save everybody.
Yeah. I think, we did talk about it, and I did a little bit of my own research, even with the data we get, right? I mean, 20 years in that space, we collect a lot of data about people, about demographics. And, some of the things that were interesting, and Kim and I talked about this, was, okay, so the demographics on Monster, we have a couple million people a month who, are on the platform. So it's a pretty good, number of people you'd see come through the site. And, essentially our demographic breaks down almost completely equal, 52-48, actually 52 female, 48 male percentage. And so then you'd say, okay, well, that's equal. Okay. And then you'd say, okay, well, how many sales jobs do you run on the site, at any given time? And we run, over 1,000 sales type jobs, anything with a keyword that you would put in with sales. And, that's still a fair amount. And yet you then think, well, how is it possible that you have such a change or disparate between how many females potentially apply for those jobs or not? And then you sort of go back to and say, okay, well, could you look at some of those job descriptions and, see what some organizations are doing perhaps better than others? And you come up with a lot of different, things. And again, these are fairly well documented, right? Forbes does a lot of write-ups about, male, gendered type job descriptions, things like ninja and superheroes. And these are not connotations that you generally make with women. That's sort of male content. But lots of people don't even recognize that. So they just, they're looking for a sales ninja. What the heck does that mean? And generally women would not, because Kim said earlier, they want to check all the boxes. They might not apply for those types of roles.
Not strong ninja skills?
Yeah, not strong ninja skills. Well, I have strong ninja skills. But so we've seen companies start to, some of the work that we do in employer branding, we've seen companies start to be more reflective of their culture, right? So actually documenting and showing how many women sit in their executive teams, what percentage of women sit in leadership roles, what percentage of women have a flexible work schedule or have, true flexibility at work, not pretend flexibility. And so some of these types of things that, companies are getting a little bit better at, they're getting a little bit more humor inside their job descriptions when they're good at it. And so those are getting a little bit more of equality in terms of the types of people who apply to them. But I would still say for the most part, we're not trying hard enough. Even if I think about Monster as a global organization, we have a lot of females and a lot of women in the executive suite, and almost a 50-50 split. But yet there's things that, as a woman, I'm not sure that I even notice sometimes, because I've been so, I've been in the space for so long that sometimes they get pointed out to me and I think, oh, geez, that there's actually something there, but you sometimes don't even see it anymore. It's you get a blind spot to it for sure.
I think one of the best examples of that was like recent Salesforce where the HR challenged the CEO that there was a compensation gap. And a lot of times in sales, we talk about the fact that it's the most gender neutral job family. But when they actually did a review, they found out that they had a $3 million gender disparity gap on their hands. And they fixed it, but then when they acquired a company after, they had another $3 million gender issue on their hands. So he didn't believe it at the beginning until they actually were able to prove it. So perfect, that makes sense. Awesome, thank you. So Jesper. So you're growing like stink, you said, and hyper growth, and I'm sure you cannot hire fast enough, right? So what are you experiencing? What are you doing differently? Like what's working, what's not working? Tell us what's failed miserably.
From a gender standpoint, trying to balance it?
Yeah, we're here to talk about women in tech
sales. So let's talk about women in tech sales. So I look at it two ways. You can either get your unfair share of the talent in the market, or you can try to increase the number of women in tech sales. So we're tackling both sides of the story. So to get our unfair share of women in tech, We look very closely at, we use Textio. Hopefully we scored well. We do use Textio, which is an application that that basically looks at how you've written your job descriptions. We look at our interview process. We make sure that when we bring a woman in, that we have a woman in the interviewing process. And we are very fortunate in that more than half of our sales leaders are women. So we're lucky there. Then there is the problem of increasing the talent pool, and that's the thing that I think is the most important that we need to figure out. We're doing a couple things at Top Hat. I don't know if you folks have heard this, but we've launched something called Top Hat Sales University. And basically, it's a 2-year program where we're going to take junior reps in, and we're going to teach them the core skills of selling. And then after they graduate, the 4 semesters, we are an ed tech company, the 4 semesters over 2 years, we're going to give them a 2-month sabbatical, because what we found, paid sabbatical, because what we found at Top Hat is that we'd bring in these young people, young humans, and they would come in and they'd make a bunch of money and they would split, men and women, and they would have like $30 or $40 or $50,000 in their bank account as 26-year-olds, and they would go traveling. And so we want to allow that to happen, and we're happy for them to come back to us. But that's not the answer. The answer is, how do we make sure we get balance coming in the door? How many people here know Jim Hamilton at Queen's University? Hands. I do. I thought there would be more people, honestly. With Jim Hamilton, who's a professor, a business professor at Queen's, and a group of folks in the tech world, we are actually doing research. We're going to grade 12 students and to second and third year students, and we're asking them about their perception of sales. And we're going to women specifically and asking about their perception in sales. And as we all know, the stereotypes, well, they're alive and well. And the reality is, tech sales is an amazing career. I worked at Salesforce, and I've seen the best. And they make a ton of money. They have, which, forget about the money, they have super rewarding, amazing careers. And people don't understand that consultative selling is, you have to use so many different skills in your toolkit, right? That is, it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman. And yes, there are elements. Women can naturally be predisposed to do well in sales, but there's absolutely nothing stopping women from being as successful as anybody in sales. And it is true, either you hit your number or you don't, right? So it's the true equalizer. So we have to do 2 things. I am competing against all of you to get my unfair share of women in sales. And I've got some tricks and things, and I'll share only a couple of them with you. But what we need to do together is we need to make sure that we are educating the market. So all the successful people in here in sales should be at universities and colleges and educating people on what a sales career really is, especially in tech, because it is a dynamic career. And it's interesting, and you can have a ton of growth. You can manage huge teams. You can travel all over the world, right? So we have to actually do something, not just get our unfair share of talent in the market, and we have to start educating young women on what being a tech salesperson really is. And then we have to create an opportunity for them to come into our environments and learn. So there's 2 angles.
Thank you. All right, we're done. Everybody has your marching orders. No, I'm just kidding. That's awesome. So you are trying hard enough. Thank you. So Wendy, I want to go back to you and ask you another question. We talked a little bit about recognition and role models and mentorship, right? So we know that organizations, as John mentioned, mentorship can be a big draw. But can you talk a little bit about your experience and the importance of the visibility, and based on your experience, and how that can actually help you attract more women into the top of your funnel, as an example, and retain?
Yeah, so maybe twofold there. So first of all, just as a personal experience, I was very lucky. When I was at GE, I started in Eastern Canada as an account exec, and a woman started in Western Canada. And we thought, oh my God, this is great. Let's champion each other. Let's not challenge each other. And each and every single day, you know, we worked with each other, we helped each other with each other's presentations. Remember, we're both competing to be the top salesperson, but we thought the best way to get there is to do it together. And that worked extremely well, and much different than mentorship, because we were in the trenches together. You know, we're just sharing real life experiences, and I thought that was excellent. At Dimension Data, which was quite unique, I think and again, I don't know if it was a strategy or if they backed into it, but they really started to do a very good job of promoting the successes of employees within the company, and especially women. So we had a worldwide conference in Johannesburg, and I was nominated as the top region out of 45 regions. It just so happened I was the only woman who headed up a region. And I have to tell you, that noise level in that room from women who were in other positions outside of sales was huge. And the support from the males was just tremendous. They all came up saying, how can we get more females in the regions? How can we get more females in the city? And just that noise level was it just created this, you know, this, I guess, wave of getting more people into the organization. But what they did as well is they externally promoted those successes. So anytime we had a chance to do a press release on growth in Canada, anytime, you know, we could be a part of CRN or, you know, any of the top solution providers, they got an opportunity to, you know, they really made it an opportunity to mention that it was a female country manager and that they were really looking for additional associates within the business. But it was really about promoting the successes of women internally and externally, and then actually championing each other as well.
I think it's interesting, right? Because I think lots of times organizations talk about mentorship. And I think, you know, it's not even necessarily about mentorship, to your point, right? It's about sponsorship. It's about having a place that a woman could, you know, see another woman in a place of either where they want to be or where they want to go, or maybe not even the same type of job, but at least seeing the organization promote and, you know, help that along. So I think even this concept of sponsorship, because lots of organizations get, you know, they get very focused on building these mentorship programs, and, you know, and yet they can't figure out why they don't work. And ultimately, you know, they may be trying, you know, but if people are not held accountable then in the organization, men and women, to sponsor and to really hold up women and, you know, be able to talk about them and encourage them, and even in a non-formal way, you know, they're not going to get to where they really want to go, because it's somewhat organic inside the organization as well. Women do not believe what they do not see. They don't. And so they don't see leaders. They don't believe that they don't believe they can. And so they don't see women in tech. They don't see, and it's, you know, it's just the truth about, you know, what they believe. And so it's not wrong. It's just needs to get more time spent on it.
You mentioned something in our conversation around that, like allies program. So I don't know if that's actually a real thing, but as not just mentorship, but an allies program, which is kind of what you're talking about.
You always need a wingman or a wing woman, but, you know, I think that's really what it is in an organization, to help you grow and to help accelerate your growth.
So I think one of the things that we always say is recruitment is a team sport, right? So you can't just leave it up to all the HR people and the recruiters to be responsible. There's not ever going to be enough recruiting to go around, and so I think taking, you know, the recognition and the external and promoting, and so as salespeople, if I think about how you can help draw more women into the organization, is seeing those opportunities and then taking them to HR. Because I think, you know, Wendy and I had a really good laugh earlier today. She said, you know, we were making job offers on the back of a napkin because we couldn't find the HR people. And then they would fax.
Those were the days.
HR people are lazy.
They would fax a copy of the napkin to HR and said, this person's starting on Monday. But it's up to all of us, right? So, John, I'll move over to you. What are your thoughts about, like, retention strategies? What are some of, like, if we move away from attraction and think about retention? You already mentioned mentoring, but is there anything else that you did differently that had an impact, or that, you know, organizations should maybe think, like, less organically about and actually create more structure around?
Something that comes to mind is with retention is really the career path. and the ability to work with it. Like, one of the things I love to do, and I get personal satisfaction out, is taking somebody who says they can't do something, but has that potential, and giving them the opportunity to do something like that. And I've seen that with, quite honestly, like a lot of women. They come in, they go, John, I couldn't do sales. I could not do sales. I could not do what you do or you guys do. And you go, okay, great, but you see the potential in that individual, and they have the emotional intelligence, and they have the IQ to be able to do that. They just don't have the confidence and encouragement. So taking and giving them that confidence and encouragement to do that. And the way you do that, I remember one lady specifically, she joined as a receptionist. I moved her to inside sales. And she goes, John, I could not go on a sales call. So I go, okay, come, let's go. And I'm going to run it. I'll do it. You just watch, right? And we go and do that. And we do that a few times. And then we go, and I say, okay, we went to this customer. You do the proposal. You've seen me do it enough. Like, you write the proposal for the customer. And then they get they're getting excited about that, and they're doing that. And the next step is, okay, you create the presentation. I'll still do it, but they create the presentation, and then they deliver the or part of the presentation. And so you transition them into these roles, and then and you watch them sort of flourish and blossom that way. And I think, particularly with a lot of women, I found it's that confidence and encouragement that they need, because they look at, and it goes back to what we talked about from university. My daughter said that, "Ugh, you're in sales, Dad. That is gross. There's no way I'm going to do it." What's one of them? Now she's taking a sales and marketing course at Niagara College. So, but it's that perception is the one thing. But again, that encouragement and confidence, because they can do that. They just got to be able to see that they do that. And I think you can, so we've taken where they go from, say, an inside sales role or a pre-sales role, or then you create parts of a sales role, and you again, I would do this with anybody, whether male, female, because was a book, Now Discover Your Strength. You look for these people where they're strong in one area, and you build around them if they have the potential. And that's a great way to get, I think, more women involved in sales and be able to, put them in a position of success so that, you retain them in the organization.
There's so many new career pathways for sales, right? It's customer success, pre-sales channel. So there's more pathways. And I think that's worked for you as well, Wendy. It's like pulling people from different parts as far as looking for women in other roles. And then building around them. So one more question for Jesper, and then we can open it up to the floor. We talked a little bit about metrics. So you don't measure time to hire. So from a talent perspective, an HR perspective, what are some of the things that you're measuring that might be different or unique to the way that you're going about recruitment? Yeah,
so on the recruiting side, we measure funnel metrics, so ratios. So outreach, so when recruiters reach out to candidates, what's their conversion ratio? So how many people do they connect with, whether it's a yes or a no? How many of those convert into being presented to a hiring manager? How many get into the interview process? How many go to offer, and how many go to hire? And my rule of thumb in sales is always we should be at around 4 or 5 to 1 submit to hire for sales. So submit means the recruiter is putting their stamp of approval on the candidate, and a hire means the hiring manager agrees. When you see that ratio start to slip past 5 and 6 and 7 and 8 to 1, there's a disconnect. Either the recruiter doesn't fully understand the role, or the hiring manager doesn't have a sense of urgency, or they may not be fully in tune with what they're looking for. So ratios, that's how I've been running recruiting for like 10 years.
Recruitment capacity, or recruiting to capacity. Was
and
the
then
other
another recruiting is sales. I did a presentation at some company's conference like 5 years ago, and we were comparing recruiting to sales. There's inbound leads, so you create inbound traffic through your brand, your posting, your social strategy, and then you've got outbound lead gen. So you've got, at Salesforce, we created inbound BDRs essentially that managed inbound candidate flow, and we had a ton of traffic. And then we created hunters, outbound BDRs, sourcers that were doing lead gen for certain type of positions where we were hiring multiples of the same type of role in the same location. Then we had the recruiters. They were the salespeople managing the process and closing candidates. And then we had various levels, so there's great opportunity for the recruiters to move up through the process, through the career ladder. But I don't have that luxury because I've got like 6 recruiters, so.
Perfect, thank you. Thanks for sharing. Not all your secrets, but some of them. So let's open it up to the floor. Who's got questions? Who wants to go first? Yes, back there. Hi. Do you need a mic?
Yeah, Angela, you mentioned something about the sales jobs, 1,000.
Yes. Yes.
I didn't hear the percentage of male to female.
So we actually can't tell the percentage of applicants of male to female of who applies. Yeah, but if you take that, and Kim and I talked about this, right, and you just you extrapolate that same methodology, you would think that should be even. I would say it's probably not, and so then why is that? And then we got back to the job description, we got back to some of those other things, but yeah.
Fundamentally, women look for jobs different to men.
We talked
right?
about that, yeah.
And so maybe expand on that a little bit.
Sure, I mean.
Because to your point, you would think that the numbers would say that it would be 50-50, but it's not. So fundamentally, they look differently.
Yeah, I mean, I use myself as an example. Women look for a job differently than men. I mean, if I speak to my husband about the way he looks for a job and the way I look for a job, it's different. And I think that's true about the women I've networked with over the years, and the executives that I spend time with. Women naturally build relationships. They're not always great, and I'm making several generalizations again too, John. But I mean, they naturally are. They're naturally relationship builders. If you think about, especially early in their career, they're generally not askers, they're givers. And so if they're networking or they're trying to find a job, perhaps not even in sales, they ask a lot of questions, but they don't ask for the want that they have, right? So the best advice I always give women, no matter, sales or not sales, and they ask me for some sort of tip, I'm always like, listen, you have to be very specific about what you are asking for. No one's going to go and say, oh geez, I'm really going to go help Angela find a job today. They don't have the time. That's not what they're that's not what they're built for. But if you go to them with a very specific ask, which women generally don't do, they can do, but they go to a very specific ask to say, okay, listen, there's 5 people in your network that I'm really interested in talking to. Could you connect me to these 2? The answer I'd give is of course, for sure. And I'm sure Jesper would same, John, anybody would do the same thing. But you have to ask, because no one's going to sort of create that for you. And so I think that's one of the keys to just getting a little bit more access.
I think to that end, it's supercharge your referral program, right? If that's how
provided that there's gender balance in your workforce.
Yeah.
Because
yeah. But you can get external referrals too, right? Like I'm a big advocate for not just employee referrals, but friends of the firm referrals.
Yep. And
I'm
some
always liking your
organizations
job
give
ads.
double, right?
Yeah.
I read actually in the I think it was Forbes. I had an article that I don't know if it's HP or who. But they have a $2,000 referral program, but if you refer a woman and they get a job, it's a $4,000 referral program.
Nice.
So it's a much bigger.
Walk the talk. Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect. Awesome. Next question. Shem, right here.
This is a question more about diversity. So we've talked a lot about women. Toronto is a city full of immigrants. And just wonder if any of you have tips and tricks about finding great new Canadians. Whether they go at their job search differently, whether there's things that we should be doing to be attracting new Canadians to our organizations.
Great question. Who wants that one?
I'll start. Years ago, I was part of a program where I would help coach and mentor new Canadians into the country, typically in the tech sector. It wasn't sales specific. And the one thing I noticed about them was a very heavy reliance. They thought they had to come to Canada and get another degree, another diploma, another certificate, and things of that, which may be relevant, but that was kind of what they leaned on extensively, I thought. And so my big encouragement to them was to get out and network a lot more, events like this and others. And I said, you got to use, to your point, Angela, like you got to make the ask, like go out, meet people, and ask them for something. So as much as we can, I would say, encouraging these people to get out and network and be part of different associations and attend these things is probably what I observed was a good start versus just relying on getting another degree or certificate.
I would answer, I'll pretend you asked a slightly different question. It's like, how do you make sure that you have a really objective interview process is really, really important so that you're not hiring the cookie cutter person over and over again. So we're growing at 50 to 70% a year, and that's revenue, and headcount is pretty close to that. We haven't got to a point where we could really go out and look at new Canadians, but trying to achieve diversity within our workforce, there are some really tactical things you can do, like talk about bias. We all have bias. It's very, very natural to have bias. And so it's really healthy for everybody that's involved in the recruiting process to talk about it and to become aware of it. We at Top Hat have an actual, a very, very objective hiring process where we look at cognitive ability. We want a work sample, and then we do a thing called top grading. Top grading is a very, very objective interview methodology that looks at work history. We don't just look for athletes. We also look for people who have worked when they went to high school, that worked when they went to university. Maybe they were on the debate club. Maybe they are a professional dancer or a high-level dancer or grade 9 pianist. When you break your recruiting process down into a really objective structure, you're giving yourself a better chance to be more objective in the hiring process. Bringing new Canadians into the company is not something that we've been able to really focus on because we're trying to survive every day. But yeah, so I kind of answered a different question, but I pretended that you asked me that question.
And just to add to that, I don't know if you've looked at the Skills for Change program. It's a great new Canadian mentoring program. Like John, I used to do that specifically for sales roles because they were, a lot of the new Canadians had a finance background, but they were looking for an opportunity, and sometimes those were transferable that we could, really sort of look at because they were detail oriented, they were number oriented, they were data, and so these were ways that we could perhaps find some skills that weren't necessarily on a job description or, someplace that looked. And Skills for Change is always looking for people to look into their database, so maybe a good place to check out.
Good tip.
They're downtown.
Awesome. Go ahead. Ladies first.
Thanks, Aubrey. Thanks, Aubrey. Just a second. Is this working? I think you might have read my mind. So I love what you're saying about going out to the universities and colleges and really educating women on what a life in sales really is. I had an engineering degree. I knew after third year, though, I could talk to people. I was VP social. Like, I knew I wanted to be in sales. There were so many women, though, who probably could have done amazing, but they had that mindset that it's not the, whether it's from their parents or growing up, it's not the right role for them. So I love what you're doing. I think I'm curious if anyone's doing this, is looking across your talent pool within the organizations, whether it's even hiring, or I'm thinking more about retaining women, and saying, this person actually has the skill set that should be in sales, and we're not utilizing it because they don't understand that they actually have those abilities. And I'm just curious if anyone's looking at that and kind of driving that.
Who here works for a fairly high growth tech firm? Put your hand up. Okay, keep your hand up. Who here has a competency model in your company? Keep your hand up. Yeah.
One person
We are,
still.
when I hire that perfect director of HR who may be in this room, I'm going to work very closely with them. See that?
Yes.
I'm going to work very closely with that person
Should've been
to,
sales.
and so is our executive leadership, to build a competency framework. Competency frameworks can be pretty challenging to build. Once, to really do that properly, you have to, I feel, have some sort of objectivity, or else it becomes favorites or something like that. And then when you couple that with a really good, and I hate to use the term performance management program, we're rebranding ours the employee success program, but when you couple that with real consistent feedback going to and from managers and their team members with the competency structure, then you can actually really start to make an impact there. We're not there yet. Yeah.
Wendy? Yeah.
So Samantha, for us, what we did is, because sometimes it doesn't matter what you say, they almost have to experience it. So we actually was a win-win for the organization and the individuals, and it wasn't just for sales. But with each and every single employee we hired, we made sure that they walked a mile in the shoes of the other department, whether it was PM, pre-sales, post-sales, technical services, ride along in the car, the consulting organization. And the people that actually were concerned about sales, thought it was something else, when they were with the salespeople, that's how we converted the majority of, a lot of our salespeople, is that they actually walked a mile in their shoes and saw what they did and saw how they delivered on the client experience. So yeah, and so we just made it part of our overall structure.
It's a great strategy. I like Walk a Mile in My Shoes program.com. Perfect. Yeah, back there.
Jasper, you described recruiting and sales. Wondering from your experience, what you found is the most successful lead generation source for talent?
Does anyone here know we held a recruiting event last Thursday? Anyone? Yeah, a couple of people. So what we did, I shouldn't be telling you this, but I will. So we created an article that was talking about Top Hat Sales U, and we talked about the type of people we hire. Then we paid for that article. We put it out in the world, and then we had our team promote it. And then we coupled that with a social campaign to target account directors, that, as we call them, and account executives. So they're kind of 1 to 2 years experience and 2 to 4 years experience. And then we had 250 people that we identified through that effort go through what we call a sales drive. Sales drive, well, we don't call it, that's a company, and it's a sales assessment. So we ran those 256 people through the sales assessment, and I think like 90 or so people came out of it. So that they scored 3 or better out of 5 to have sales aptitude. Then we invited 46. We had 39 people show up for our hiring event. It was not a recruiting event. And we do the Wonderlic, we do the top grade, and we do a Prezo. So when I talked earlier about sample of work, it's very, very easy to get a sample of a salesperson's work. Get them to do a pitch right in front of you. We had this crazy thing going on. We're moving people around. We had them in there from 6 to 10, and we ran them through a full gamut of hiring, and we ended up hiring, so far, we're still kind of getting the offers in, accepted. We extended 13 offers, 13 out of 39, and we'll probably end up with 11 hires. So that is very, very tactical, but we used our PR person to help us create the story, get it in the right place. We used our employee population to pump it out into the social world. We did build some social ads. And then we got, from the ad, we got 11 of the candidates. We got another 15 from referral, and the rest came in through inbound traffic.
So Angela, it's all about brand, right? At the end of the day. Right?
Absolutely. I mean, the brand of, what you want to say about your organization, who you are, what you look like every day, what's the day in the life of, right? These are all things that are, that an organization or an individual can go anywhere to look at, right? I mean, they can go to Glassdoor, they can go, they can see culture in your organization. So even if you're, trying to change or, build your cultural organization, you have to really build and buy, and sometimes buy, the brand that you're trying to create, the culture that you're trying to create. And whether that's, an equality culture or a collaboration culture or whatever that is, but, really owning that and just, being what it is and calling it out what it is, being, very transparent about what your organization's trying to be, you're going to end up retaining more people in that type of organization anyways, because everybody knows that one of the top reasons people leave organizations is company culture. And so we could talk about it all we want, but if you actually don't do it, it's
And when you change comp plans, it's number 2.
But it's really, really important not to pretend to be someone you're not.
absolutely.
And one of our core values is aggressive growth. We had a town hall a couple weeks ago, and someone said, "Hey, Mike, our CEO, are we really a startup? We're 300 people." And he simply responded that startup is a state of mind, right? It's crazy being in a startup. And for all of us here who are in one, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Like you have to be good with change. You can't be seeking stability. You have to be seeking adventure and high growth, and to a degree, as much as you can have it, meritocracy.
Aubrey, I didn't forget about you. Aubrey.
So I have maybe a two-part question. The first one is, when it comes to retention, what's the biggest misconception out there when it comes to retaining women in sales roles in tech? And the second part of it, from your own personal experience, whether that be professional or not, any lessons that you've had to learn the hard way around losing women rock star salespeople, things you could have done differently, and what you would tell everyone in this room about how not to repeat your mistakes?
That's like great question. It's a book.
I'll say one thing. We had, so I've been at Top Hat for a year and a bit now. We had 2 or 3 women leave the sales org about 8 or 9 months ago, and they were really strong performers. And we found out that the managers were creating an environment where it was okay to go get your 30 or 50 grand in the bank and then go traveling. I think the number one most important thing is to have quality managers that are focused on developing the careers of the people on their team. If the managers are just grinding out to get to their number and looking at the dials or the demos or the whatevers, I think that's the key. And we are completely working through things at Top Hat, and those of you who know who we are working through those things, and we have not solved it, but where we're going to focus our attention, where we can get the biggest multiple of our effort, is the managers. The managers have to be focused on developing their people. If they're just focusing on cranking out numbers and dials and hitting a gong, they're going to have attrition. So that's really, really tactical, and I only answered the easier part of your question, partially.
John, do you want to?
I'm going to put myself out on a limb a little bit, and maybe I'll get some advice from the HR and recruiting part of the group here. So I had a situation a while ago where I had an opening for a sales management role, and there was a lady who worked for me who thought she was the de facto sales manager that was going to go into that role. And I said, maybe, but no, I'm going to go to the market and look for the best candidate, and you're welcome to apply for that role. And she quit as a result of that I didn't put her in that role. So, in answer to the retention, I don't know if I should have handled, and she was great, and I still have a lot of respect for her as an individual and a sales professional, and didn't want to lose her. And I look at that and I go, okay, should I have handled that differently? Was there something I should have done differently? From a gender perspective, in order to, ensure she stayed in the organization. But I felt as an executive, it's still my job to, again, I don't like to de facto give anybody a role. I think you need to look at it objectively. So, again, I'll throw that out, and maybe somebody can give me advice over a beer or what I should have done in that situation. Yeah.
Wendy, do you have anything to add? Thanks, John.
Yeah, I just think it's a tough goal, especially with a startup, and you guys are growing as fast as you can, as you are. But from my perspective, you do have to be personally invested. I was talking to Kim, and I said, I thought the hardest part was to grow a company from 1 to 50 employees. It was actually after you were over 50 employees, because I had to bring other managers in, and they didn't necessarily resonate, with the team like I did, and that was very, very tough. because I wanted to know that those people were not only happy professionally, but they were going home and they were also successful from a personal perspective. What they did at home and the energy that they created is what they brought back into the office. And that retention strategy is you really have to be invested, and you do have to care. And you have to make sure that when they do show up, that they, you know, they can show up with the energy that's required to do the job. So it's that personal investment in them. It's a tough thing though, boy, very tough.
But I'll say, I think being a manager is a big responsibility. And that's what we're trying to instill in every manager. It comes with a major responsibility. And if you're not invested and if you don't care, you should not be a manager for sure.
Because that's really about accountable leadership, right?
For sure.
I mean, and that's, you know, to this point about retaining women in, did I just say that? Yeah. That's really about retaining women in the space, right? I mean, because, you know, you could have, back to that concept of having all those things in place, but then if you have a manager, you know, at the front line doing something differently than what that, you know, what that culture is supposed to look like, and they're really not accountable for not only attracting in the funnel, but also retaining women in the roles, you know, that's you know, that's their responsibility. Absolutely agree.
I feel like we didn't answer the harder question. Did you say, how do you retain?
So the harder question was maybe just some personal lessons that you've had to learn the hard way around retention.
I don't think it's different. Like men or, I mean, it's really sort of, to me, the individual, and that's kind of the way I looked at it always. Is they're all. Yeah, exactly. Like my big lesson was, you know, again, early management days, treat everybody the same, and it's kind of that one size fits all approach, and that doesn't work. You got to address both the personal and the professional needs of each of those individuals, and make sure you're kind of resonating with them and saying, how am I helping you? And I was, I mean, that was my line always. I said, I work for you. Like I'm just your coach and person that's facilitating your career. So how do I help you? And not just me specifically, but you try to create a team of that around you, so that people are feeling that, like, my job is just to enable you in that organization. So how can I best do that? And if you kind of have that servitude attitude about that, I think it just goes a long way to retention. And then I can be a mean old boss at the end and says, did you make your quota?
Two things I'd like to add. We've touched on it a little bit here, but flexibility. Sales can be a very flexible role for the most part, but you alluded to something earlier, like true flexibility.
So I think time off.
Yeah. So I think that if organizations can think a little bit more strategically, and there isn't like this homogenized HR where like everybody gets a sabbatical, that's not the case, right? Salespeople, the best salespeople can be, you know, obviously make or break an organization from a revenue perspective. So I think companies need to think a little bit more strategically and differently about flexibility as a way to attract and retain. And then you met Camus, the COO of Wrangle earlier, who introduced and kicked us off. She said something to me that resonated with me, and I've been like repeating it since last week, is women opt out of opportunities. So we actually opt out all the time because we got to pick up the kids, or you can't leave the husband at home. You know, babysitting for a week, like we can't pick up and fly out to a prospect, and so we opt out all the time without trying a little harder or asking for a different scenario or solution within our organization. So I know that doesn't answer, and it's kind of like one-to-one, but I do think that those are some of the how-tos and how organizations, like when I say we're not trying hard enough, oftentimes it's because we're not thinking out of the box or getting more creative and persistent about some of the things that we do. So hopefully that
actually,
helps.
Kim, sorry. When I was doing my informal survey of people who work with me, flexibility was a key. Like I asked them, why did you go into sales and what kept you in sales? And flexibility was a key component. Obviously, raising families and whatnot, they felt that a career in sales gave them that flexibility in order to sort of balance both personal and professional life.
And even if you think about the types of perks, benefits, right? You know, if you thought about that paternity leave, for example, was a perk or a benefit for a man, in actual fact, that's a huge benefit for an organization to have, so that they could actually take time, so that their wife could, or their partner or spouse could could advance their career.
Yep.
So thinking about, they're not always set just for that particular gender, but they help the family unit. And when they help the family unit, they ultimately help the woman.
Housekeeping services, that's what really gets us going. Concierge and housekeeping. You'll win every time. Okay, perfect, awesome, thank you. That's great insights. So I think we have time for one more. So, sorry, where do I go? Here. Need somebody watching out for me because I can't see for both sides. John. And our panel's going to stick around for a little bit, right? So we can ask and answer some questions.
There's beer and food, I'll stay.
Yeah. You're in.
All right, my question is actually for you, Kim.
Okay.
And then just a couple of thoughts, and then I figure we're here because there's a problem. And I don't know what everyone can do, but there are a couple of things I could do. And if everyone might take that approach, maybe we can make the problem better. I can't always be the best at my own problems, but I'm good at helping other people with their problems. So my question is, you had a 79% more effective stat for women over men in sales. Can you talk a little bit more about that, where you got that maybe?
Yeah, so it was 73, 74%.
Okay.
But that stat was a study that was done, it was US based, because we don't always have the relevant stats here in Canada, but it was a US company that did a study on 989 professionals over a 7-year period of time and tracked the success of women versus men and who was outperforming and underperforming. And so the statistic came from that study that showed that over time, women actually outperformed their male counterparts when it came to hitting sales targets and driving revenue numbers.
Sure.
Yeah.
And the reason I ask isn't that I don't believe you, it's because I might want to quote you. And the way I can help is, I work with predominantly, not always, but more HR women than men. And many times they ideally look to me for advice. So I'm going to call them out and say, look, if you're having problems, why aren't you hiring more women? Because they will produce more. They're going to be a great employee. And
Yeah, I think
we can all do a little bit to kind of help the problem. And I think that if that's a true fact, which it is, let's just bring it out there and call them out, and
I
they'll
think
be better off for it.
it's not just like a nice thing to do, right? Or it's not just because it's the right thing to do, but there's actually a great business case for trying a little harder and maybe rethinking or reimagining some of your policies, your assessment, how you select, your employee referral program, your perks, your benefits, how you represent and position your brand. So all of these things, like recruitment is hard. There's no silver bullet. And so all of these things can make or break a big difference, and even if we just get one more at the top of the funnel. Perfect. So like I said, our panelists are going to stick around, very generous with their time, so we can ask and answer questions that maybe you didn't get to. But a big round of applause for our experts. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So I'll let you guys go back to your seat, and we're going to wrap up. Sorry. Don't move yet. You guys can move. Thank you. Thank you. Just need 2 more minutes. Okay, so as I mentioned, just really quickly, a couple of announcements. And want to thank Wrangle again. One last round of applause for Wrangle. Thank you so much. Really appreciate this. Hopefully we'll be back. I also want to thank our team, Talent Minded. So we run this meetup sort of on the side of our desk when we're not doing our day jobs. And one of the things that I consistently hear is how engaged this team is and how well run these meetups are. So I just wanted to take a moment to thank them for being here and for being so special. We have an awesome team, so thank you, everybody. I especially want to shout out to Haley and Leah because they're my mains, and you guys do a great job. There isn't anything that you don't think of before me, so I am very happy to have you on board. So I want to say a quick word about Monster. So generous of you to help us and support us and have great beer and wine and food. If you're in HR or if you've ever looked for a job, like oftentimes we think about Monster as like a job board or in the job ad space. And I was surprised when I was talking to Angela to learn that you're 20 years in recruitment and in this business. Monster Canada, and that actually the employer branding piece is your pillar, right? Is the fastest growing part of Monster. And so one of the things I always tell organizations is that your brand is your number one source of hire, right? Somebody asked, where do you get your best hires from? Like, people will access you from multiple, like 52 different locations. And so your brand is actually the number one reason why they might apply. And so if you haven't taken a look at some of the videos for Monster, branding your own organization and your solution, like, they are amazing. Like especially the ones in the UK, they're hilarious. And so if you can do like a half of that for any organization, it's a great service. So thank you very much to Monster for being part of this particular event. And I'm going to leave you with something, because Angela, you wrote this to me, which I thought was brilliant. Women in tech are coveted. If you want them, make them want you. So. I will leave you with that. Thank you for coming. I hope to get a chance to network, and if we've achieved our objectives, please let me know. If you have any topics or ideas for our next gen, we'd love to hear them. We're always open to new ideas. You can reach out to me directly, kim@talentminded.ca. Thank you. Now you can go drink.